This is Bruce.
And this is Ashlyn.
Thanks for joining the Life Report.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Tonight we have Mike Delgado here with us, and we just asked him to come and sort of unpack his story of grace and restoration. A lot of the conversation around expecting pregnancies, unexpected pregnancies, abortion, all of that stuff, it's really about the woman. But there is a male side to all of this. So we've asked Mike to just step in and sort of show us what's going on with the expecting fathers and the men who are involved. So welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for asking me to share my part of the story. Right there is a lot of attention on the women, but I'm excited to share what that looks like, a male role being a part of everything.
Yeah. There's definitely a sense that, hey, we want to be pro-woman. We want to focus on those things. But obviously there's been kind of a vacuum of biblical manhood and fatherhood that your story, I think, especially just the grace and redemption that's gone on. So thanks for joining us, sharing your story. We usually mention this at the end, but before we begin, I want to encourage any listeners who have abortion as a part of their story just to reach out. Email us at healing@watermark.org. We'd love the opportunity to come alongside you and offer support and love through the healing process, or even if you're experiencing unexpected pregnancy, we have a ministry of mentors and people that would walk alongside you. And that email address is pregnant@watermark.org. So with that, to kick things off and bring our audience kind of up to speed, Mike, could you give us just like an abridged version of your story?
Yeah. So I grew up in a single parent home. The girl that I had children with was something very similar. And so we were just two kids looking for something to complete us. And as you have two kids not having a lot of structure in their lives to kind of form what they think structure is, and with time, immaturity, and just a lot of ignorance, left alone together quite often. And so then came the first pregnancy, and then there's a lot of things in there to unpack. And then a second pregnancy came about 2 years after that. And so there's been quite a bit of a roller coaster ride in there with things that happened before, during, and even after that has been hard for both of us. And specifically, there is some things that touch on abortion, adoption, and currently both of my kids do live with me. It's been only about a year and a half since that's happened, but been definitely a beautiful thing. Has been restored from what our relationship looked like years ago. And so a lot to unpack there, but there is for sure a lot that I could own up to in failing, but beautiful how the Lord has allowed us all kind of to be knit together again with just strong ties of love. So
yeah, love it. So what was just how were you introduced to sex in general? Like, what was kind of your introduction? Ashlyn and I both kind of talked about this as we were talking about what was it? It was the chatbot that Planned Parenthood has to talk to teenagers about sex. And so my introduction was really, like pornography in my middle school lunchroom table or high school lunchroom table. And Ashlyn had like, those crazy parents that just talk to their kids about sex and like actually prepare them for these things. And so how were you introduced to sex? Like what did your parents teach you? Kind of what were your thoughts about that, before pregnancy ever became a reality for you?
I never had that talk with my mom. It was nothing she ever initiated with us. So I was introduced to sex at just a cousin's house. I was over there and hanging out, and my cousin, his older brother, actually had some stuff, and let me show you something. And so didn't really know what was going on. I knew what I was looking at was wrong because I knew if someone walked in the room that I would probably not like for them to watch what I was watching. Yeah, that was initially how I figured out what that was, and didn't really have any male figure to bounce off. Hey, what did I just see? What was that? It just was kind of a shock.
Do you remember how old you were? Just curious.
I couldn't tell you a specific age, but I was definitely in elementary school. I would say probably second or third grade.
And was there like a sense of just kind of relationships with women? How was that modeled for you? And, sort of the idea of like, hey, we want to honor women, we want to dignify women, anything like that you just kind of like maybe, whether you consciously made that choice or not, just kind of what that relationship looked like.
No, quite the opposite, because my mom was in multiple marriages and they just weren't healthy marriages. And so with the multiple unhealthy marriages, my grandmother moved in with us because she was in a divorce. And so it was just, all I saw were kind of unhealthy male father figures or husband figures in the household, also partnering with that. I just watched a lot of MTV. It wasn't like a rock and roll thing for me. It was a R&B thing. And so with R&B comes R&B music videos. And so they just have a very particular way of talking about women and singing about women and whatever music video. So it was just a difference of just unhealthy manhood and just music, kind of putting those together. And so that's kind of how my idea of just what that looked like as far as a man father figure.
So it sounds like, unfortunately, a lot of the upbringing and being in a single parent home, there wasn't a huge amount of education or emphasis on what sex and pregnancy and abortion were all about. So what was your knowledge base on like what pregnancy and abortion were before the first pregnancy happened?
Very little. I knew what it meant to get pregnant. I knew they had a baby 9 months later. So anything in between that, I didn't know what went on during that time. And even abortion was not anything that I had ever heard of. I just knew it was something that you could do. But being a young kid in my eyes there, I grew up in a Catholic family. And so say what you want about Catholics, there are strong ties of bonds in the Catholic religion. And so family was always something that has been strong in my own heart. And so while I didn't know why I believed what I believed, I just knew what I grew up around. And so it was, hey, we all live with each other if we have to, but we step into the role of as a man and husband. And so that's just kind of what all I knew about really abortion at that point was. It just isn't an option. As far as the intricacies of what it is and how it worked, I knew absolutely nothing.
So going into it without knowing much, how did you feel when she told you she was expecting, and how did she even tell you?
I don't think she didn't have to tell me. So we both knew as she was getting sick and her belly started to grow. It was kind of just a writing on the wall of, okay, well, I think that there's a baby in there. And it wasn't so much of how does she tell me as much as how do we now tell the broken homes what's about to be, what life's about to look like.
So how did y'all tell people?
So with my mom, we just sat her down and just said, hey, look, we're having a baby. We trusted her to react calmly, whereas her parents, unfortunately, that trust wasn't there. And so I didn't tell them. I wasn't there when she told them. And that went about how we knew it would be, or when it didn't go well. And so that initial reaction by them kind of fed into quite a bit of how the next multiple years transpired in both of our lives.
Wow. So with all of that, where did the option of abortion come up, and what was your reaction there?
So we waited a while to tell them. It was just fear. We didn't, she was a very small girl, so she hid herself under large sweaters for quite a while. And so when she did tell her parents, their initial reaction was, this is not happening. We are going to take you to get an abortion. And so in that time, there were no iPhones, no cell phones. It was, AT&T, whoever, barely picked up, where kids could have their own line in their bedroom. And so it is harder to get a hold of somebody. And so she told me, hey, my mom's taking me to get an abortion tomorrow, and that's just what it is. And so there was no way to get a hold of them. And I didn't think that just showing up at the house was the right call. Her father was a very large man, and so also something that I didn't want to do. And so I just thought that she had an abortion the next day. I grieved and just I didn't know what to feel. I just felt major sadness. And she didn't actually tell me that it didn't happen until multiple days after that. And so for a couple of days, I was grieving the loss of my daughter, thinking, hey, this is just sadness. And then she called me a couple of days later and said, hey, I'm too far along. And so they wouldn't do it. And that's when there was just a lot of, I guess, hey, I can breathe now because she's going to live.
Man, that's amazing.
Yeah, there's definitely that sense. Like, I think I know I've had it before I really knew anything or knew anyone who had an abortion, had participated in one, or who, experienced unexpected pregnancy, that, there's always this kind of shady dude in the background who is constantly just sort of like manipulating this vulnerable girl to go get an abortion so that he can kind of be free of his responsibility or his part in it. And the more that I've talked to guys like you, it's sort of I wasn't like this sleazy. I wasn't trying to push her into anything. In some ways I was passive. In other ways, or in other circumstances, it was just sort of I didn't know. I maybe knew even less than she did. And, it was a parent or a friend or somebody who sort of introduced the idea or pushed the idea of abortion. Now, I know that there are guys out there who, do take advantage, are manipulative, all those kinds of things. And, you hear those stories, just really frustrating. But like you just mentioned, sort of that relief or that kind of, feeling in your gut where you're just sad and grieving. So what was, sort of the moment of like, oh, okay, we're going to parent here? Like, was adoption ever something that you considered, or what was that like?
Parenting, adoption, they are both such beautiful things. For me personally, just again, kind of going back to that big family dynamic, parenting was always an option for me. It was difficult because, with the parents kind of being heavily involved there, they kind of took her out of school and hid her from me. So I actually didn't know when my daughter was born. Their mom, actually, her friend walked up to me at school and was just like, hey, I think you should know that your baby was born like a couple days ago.
Wow.
And so even after that, I was left off the birth certificate, and so had to go get a DNA test done. And so fast forward 6-7 months, I don't have still a lot of time with, I think I had seen Mackenzie is my daughter's name. I think I'd seen her once. And so it just looked a lot different. And so I had to fight to be there. And so we went through a lot of court cases, court battles, to just prove that, hey, I am the father. It was really me fighting to be in her life more though than actively being able to play a role in her life. And so I would say that started when she was around probably 1.5. And then it just looked like not normal. I was a kid trying to raise a kid. And so it looked like a lot of help from the mom. But it really wasn't until she was a little older that I got to even try to be a parent.
Remind me how old you were when all of this started.
I was 16.
Okay. I think it's amazing that you fought. Most 16-year-olds would probably just be like, well, they don't want me around, I guess I won't be around. So that's really cool. That's huge.
So parenting is a part of your story, obviously, with your daughter, but abortion is a part of your story as well.
Yes.
Right? Would you unpack, obviously, I'm not trying to get you to share all the, the gruesome details or anything like that. Would you unpack some of that of just, when those instances did come up and what that was like for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the mother of the two kids, it's the same woman. Her name is Samantha. And so when her and I got out of high school, it was just apparent, hey, this is not going anywhere. She kind of went and did her thing. I went and did my thing. I started to date another girl, and she got pregnant. And I can, now look back and see how it was different. At the time, I didn't think I thought any different, but there was just a major mind shift in the 16-year-old me and then the 20 to 21-year-old me, whereas the 16-year-old me was owning up to what was going on a lot more than the older version of me. And so essentially the first abortion that, because I shared two with the same girl. And so the first one was it was a lot of fear. What are people going to think of me? How can I afford this financially? How can you afford this financially? It's going to change my lifestyle. Everything was revolved around how it would affect me and nothing about how it would affect this child. And so I did push for this one. I would say she wanted to do it as well, but I made sure to highly enforce that I was in favor of this choice, and I made it look like it was her choice, which was very deceiving of me. And that's just kind of what that looked like. The second time that we did do that was when a lot of those same feelings were there, but then while I was in the waiting room, I knew what was going on was wrong, and every inch of just being inside of me wanted to just walk through those doors and say, hey, stop, we can do this. I just didn't, just let it happen. And so that was kind of how those happened.
When did things change? Like, when did your understanding of, sex and women and abortion in general, when did that all start to turn for you?
Probably when I was around 24, 25, met a couple guys and started to hang out in some different crowds and hang out at Watermark. And so for me, it was not so much as, hey, this can change now because it wasn't like, hey, I'm a believer, this is what they think, now it changes. It was more of, hey, now what I believe, oh no, now I go back and look at the pain that I actually caused by this. And so as I mentioned, I was a single parent home. And so not only was I growing up in the faith through the church, I was being reparented through the church. And so a lot of what I was learning was just how to be a man and own up to things. And as I grew in how to just be a man was how I also grew. And now how do I look back and own up to what I did? And so, that's when the view of sex changed, how it's a beautiful thing. And most folks would think that, Christians are like, hey, only sex when you're married. And while we do believe that, one thing that I think has been most freeing for me is that I actually don't have a more restrictive view of sex. I feel more freedom in that. And so, that's when that changed. And then as far as the abortion piece, it just took some guys around me to push me and say, hey, let's look at what you did. Not in a let's, show you all your sins and beat you on the head. But there's a sense that if you need to find healing, you need to truly understand what happened. And I think that this would be helpful for you in your grieving process. And so while it was very hard to watch, I think I understand more now the choices that I made so that I can tell other people, hey, don't walk down this road. There's actually just as much hurt and pain and difficulty if you walk down this road than there is if you think that you're just going to get an abortion and not walk down that road. So anyways, it was not until I was probably mid-20s and years after that of just seeking healing from what happened that I understood and changed and shifted and all that, because I was a huge bit of, hey, women's body gets you out of it. But the thing, it doesn't. There's so much pain behind that. So
yeah, what was repairing that like? I mean, what was the going and owning or trying to bring about some kind of reconciliation like for you? Like, were there specific words that you remember saying, or, how did those interactions go? Like, I guess in some ways I'm asking, like, if you were to go and I think there are a lot of women who have experienced abortion, are suffering some, kind of post-traumatic abortion syndrome type of symptoms, and just going, yeah, I just felt rejected. And like, I just want to know that, maybe not every dad or every man that was a part of that, just kind of dismissed it and ignored it and has moved on. Like, what do you say to that woman?
I guess there's probably a couple things in there. What it looked like for me was, and this may not be the wisest thing for everybody, I wasn't married at this time. And so for me at that time, what it looked like was seeking out the woman that happened with, and asking her questions, asking her how she felt, asking her if I did anything that made her feel like she had to do that, and just seeking to understand, hey, how does she feel now? Does she understand what we did then?
Yeah.
And then owning up to what that put her through physically. There's a physical aspect to what happens afterwards, emotionally, spiritually. And so just connecting with her was something that was helpful to heal. I had to ask her if there was any resentment, and to seek forgiveness there. I think what was helpful for me was I thought that because it didn't come up in my mind anymore that I was healed, but I was just really good at forgetting. And so I think that being mindful of being healed and not just, hey, I don't think about it anymore, they're totally different. And so to actively think about what happened, and I don't know if this is the wisest thing, but I actively thought about, hey, this is what my life should have looked like, and the decisions that I made that day, both times, drastically altered a lot. Just in prayer, had to seek forgiveness and just state every single thing for me that I could own just through prayer, and to seek forgiveness for that, and to tell my guy friend and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking, good, bad, ugly, to not feel, hey, you're being judged, or you're not, you don't have enough faith. It's just like, hey, just listen to me. I'm hurting. And so that's what that healing process for me looked like. And as far as what I would tell a woman walking through that, or that has walked through that, again, I guess that's just subjective on the man, but I would say that it affects us in a different way. We don't feel the physical effects days after, which it's hurtful. I was there taking care of my girlfriend at the time, and it I don't want to ever be there. But the scars are just as deep as it affects men just as much, just emotionally. And so there are options. There are multiple options, not to go through that route. And at the time, you don't really see anything other than what you're going through and how to fix it, what's going to make this feel better. And it's almost like trying to put a Band-Aid on something you need surgery on. It's not going to work. It's not going to hold. It's going to come off eventually, and there's going to be pain. And having someone there to walk with you, man, woman, family, anybody else is I think was for me pivotal in healing and moving forward.
Mike, you've shared a lot of really great stuff today. Is there any other imparting words of encouragement or advice that you'd want to share with the young men who are facing those unexpected pregnancies today?
I would say there's a path forward, and the path forward may not always be clear to see, but it's there. The weight of the decision that you're about to make, you're going to have a lot of differing opinions, but ultimately you alone are going to be the one to bear the weight, for better or for worse, of that decision. And so I think one thing that I wish I had around me were more people that had my well-being, just the best of my future in mind, and for the child, and that could remind them that it's not if it's a child, it is a child. It's not if the child is going to be born in 9 months, the child is alive, and to have them start doing things now that they could connect with that child, and don't wait for when the child is born. You know, the women naturally carry the child, and there's that just connection every day for 9 months where I would say don't wait for day one. Start connecting immediately, and that may look different for some folks, whether you are talking to the child daily or, you know, rubbing the belly or doing whatever you can to connect with that child that's not naturally there for us men. And so I say just go ahead and start, and then you'll feel connected, and then I think that highly changes your mindset on what you want to do.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for sharing your story with us. You know, I realize some of this stuff is hard to drudge up, and, you know, we don't want to be salacious or anything like that. We just want to be an encouragement to men that are out there and go, hey, I mean, God's called you to protect and to lead and to guide, and fatherhood is just this incredible gift that we have. And so thanks for joining us. Thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me share that. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Life Report.